Hi everyone, I'm back at it. I'm going to do another one here, about 10 minutes at most, on the executive branch. But first, I was just asked to go to Lowe's, and I guess there's a difference between potting soil and garden soil. Who would have known? I know we're under quarantine. I've mostly been staying in, but a few errands here and there, just so we can do stuff around the house, but keeping our social distancing. So anyway, executive branch, real quick. We just did this, just what, 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago. Well, I can't even keep track now. 2 or 3 weeks ago, and this is just a real quick review, running through this, just like I just did with the legislative branch. So, presidential system versus parliamentary. Remember, the founders chose the presidential system because they thought with the parliamentary system that there was too much of a connection between the members of parliament and the control they had over the prime minister. So they wanted our system to be a separate system with an independent executive. And the qualifications: natural born citizen, minimum of 35 years old, live in the U.S. at least 14 years. Term limits come about with the 22nd Amendment in 1951. And compensation, we talked about all the different things, especially Secret Service and a cook and secretaries and just clothing and everything else, Camp David and the White House, all that. Presidential succession: vice president is after the president, and then so on down the line. The 25th Amendment deals with disability and succession. Remember when the founders were trying to decide, they did not like the choice of a parliament or a Congress choosing the president because they would have too much control, and they didn't feel like the founders were, that the people were smart enough to choose the president. So they ended up going with the Electoral College. Electoral College is a very complex system, obviously. And actually, I'll back up here once. The Electoral College, that is a very key thing. I mean, again, that should be fresh in our minds. But remember that the Electoral College, the number of electors is decided by, or is determined by, how many House seats you have plus your 2 Senate seats. So the minimum any state could have would be 3. In order to win a state's electoral votes, you must win the popular vote of the state. And 48 of the 50 states do a winner-take-all. So as long as you win by 1 popular vote, you get all the electoral votes, with Maine and Nebraska being the exceptions. Out of 538 total electoral votes, you need 270 to win the presidency, and if you do not get 270, then if no one gets 270, you'll be thrown to the House of Representatives, the 3 highest vote getters in the Electoral College, and then they will vote with 1 vote per state in the House of Representatives, while the Senate chooses the vice president. I showed you those pictures in class. Electoral College, again, I just explained that. Election of 1800 was pretty messed up, so it led to the 12th Amendment. The 12th Amendment makes the Electoral College into really the form that we have in it today. So any questions you'd ever have, if you want to skim through the 12th Amendment, that really outlines the way the Electoral College works. In the 2008 election, you see how the states were all broken down here, relatively recent. We know that typically this area here will go to the Democratic Party, and up here will go to the Democratic Party. This is pretty right down the middle. The U.S. is consistently conservative. You notice in that one election, though, in 2008, Nebraska did split and give 1 electoral vote to Obama. And that happened in 2016 up in Maine. So Maine and Nebraska has split now once, has split their electoral votes. 4 times. I need to update this. This is an old PowerPoint, actually. Obviously, 2016 should be added to this list. So 5 times the candidate who was one of the most popular votes lost the election. And we did spend some time talking about the 2000 election. Again, you can see the West Coast goes Democratic, the Northeast mostly Democratic, and then the middle here is Republican. The Southeast generally Republican, although Virginia, even North Carolina has gone Democratic in recent years. Florida, though, is always a huge swing state, and really Ohio. Florida and Ohio are really key states. In addition to Pennsylvania and maybe in Michigan and occasionally like a Colorado has started to switch Democratic a little bit more than it used to be. And then New Hampshire actually played a big role in this election of 2000. The county vote in the 2000 election, like I said, I always find those maps to be very interesting maps. Powers of the president. Powers of the president, you can run down through these and just make sure we understand the checks to them. Executive orders and also executive agreements that he makes with other countries. And the White House staff generally is a little bit more loyal to the president than the cabinet. The cabinet positions are often just mostly political appointments, and the White House staffers tend to be a little closer with the president. So remember the executive orders, that just to put it in perspective with these presidents, the total that they gave, the executive orders they did while in office, it's quite a few. And when you break it down by year, they're giving 40, 50, 80 a year, roughly, something like that. And Trump has also done plenty of executive orders. One of the infamous ones, the internment of the Japanese Americans, 9066. In the case Korematsu v. U.S., the Supreme Court actually determined that this internment of the Japanese Americans was constitutional. We talked about this in class. Remember all these monuments or national parks that the presidents make. You see what Clinton did. He made that big one that Trump has been looking into since he's been in office. 1.7 million acres in Utah right before the election in 1996. And then a lot of these were right on his way out of office. Clinton made those national parks right before leaving. We'll skip over these. These were just that Grand Escalante National Monument that we talked about in class. So fiscal policy, monetary policy, and incomes policy, I wouldn't probably worry about these. I don't believe they're going to be on the test this year. We will say that fiscal policy is the government's ability to control, with the president's help too, the ability to control taxing and spending. That's a way that you can really impact the economy. If the economy is really struggling, that maybe you can lower taxes so people have more money. Maybe you can spend more government money to try to stimulate the economy, just like they're doing right now with the coronavirus. How they just passed the House is voting today to pass the bill to send all adults $1,200 and kids the equivalent of $500, and there's a little bit of a sliding scale with the money to the adults depending on how much they make, but that's where the government is going to spend money to try to help the economy. So fiscal policy is tax and spend. Monetary policy, we may do that if we get into the economics unit, and it's mostly the Federal Reserve, and we won't worry about the incomes policy now. Remember, these were just kind of some dry vocab terms we ran through. We'll skip that first one. Bully pulpit, that's the president's ability that when he speaks, people listen, and at times he can really use his bully pulpit, where if he's really popular, just won a big re-election or something, then he tells people to do something, and politicians will often do it. We'll skip impoundment, and then 3 types of veto. Veto, remember, you can override a president's veto with 2/3 of both houses. A pocket veto can only happen in the last 10 days of a session of Congress, so that in the last 10 days of a session of Congress, if the president does nothing with a bill that comes to his desk, it just dies. Line item veto, the president does not have that power, although many people think he should, which would just be passing a budget bill, a spending bill, but maybe vetoing 1, 2, 3, 5 parts of it, and then passing the bill anyways. If that was a power of the president, like it is with some governors, then that line item veto, each of those line item vetoes could be overridden separately by both houses of Congress, which would be probably impossible to do. And then lastly, we went over the War Powers Act of 1973. Hopefully we're familiar with that. Remember, it was 2 or 3 parts. So if the president does anything militarily, he must inform Congress within 48 hours as to why he did, 48 hours after. If Congress does not approve, then the troops must return within 60 days, and there can be a 30-day extension granted to that for a total of 90 days if there's a fear of troop safety. And then finally, the impeachment process. Remember, to impeach a president, the House must impeach, and that's just to bring up charges with a simple majority vote. And then it would go to the Senate, and the Senate holds the trial with the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court presiding over that. in the Senate trial, after the Senate trial, the Senate will vote, and 2/3 of the Senate must vote for the president to be removed. And the only punishment that can happen in terms of impeachment from the House and the Senate is simple removal of the president. That would not be go to jail or anything like that. The impeachment process is just removal of the president. So anyway, like I said in the last one, I know these are fairly dry. Again, I just wanted to get them down. I wanted to put them on Google Classroom, get them out there in case you wanted a quick review. You're sitting around, and I think it'd be good to kind of keep our memory fresh and what we've been up to along the way. And so I may do one more of these, and then again, hopefully a little different format for the chapters upcoming. So hope everyone's doing well, and it is now Friday afternoon, and hopefully you will enjoy your weekend, although I'm not sure you'll know much difference between the weekend and the weekdays right now. But all the best, everyone. Thank you.